Right, you can hear me. Oh, we got some feedback. Nobody needs to hear my voice echoing. How's that? Nope. You know what it is? That's on. Hello? All right, here we go. Nobody needs to hear my double time of my voice, that's for sure. Thank you all for coming to our community forum. I'm just going to do a really quick foundation, and then I'm going to pass it over to the folks in charge of tonight's presentation. My name is Kate Massananti. I sit on the school committee, and myself and Mr. Mahoney are the co-chairs of the school building committee. I just wanted to give a quick foundation explanation of what you're going to see tonight. And there's going to be, we're in what's called the schematic design phase of the project, where the architects, the engineers, our project managers are putting together what our project is going to potentially look like. They sat and they met with all our educational leaders, and they've put together in my opinion, a wonderful school, projected school. They filled it with what we want to be able to give the best programmatic offerings, educational programmatic offerings to our kids. What you will see will be a little bit bigger than what we initially projected. And we're in the part of the process where we're paring that down. But we're coming at this with transparency of the process. So you may see a school that is a little bit larger, but over the next few weeks and months, we're going to be paring that down and making sure that it's a school that's filled with what we need to give our students the best educational programs that we can give them. So with that said, I'm actually going to pass it over to Phil Conti with Studio Jade. Sorry, we're going to pass it over to Chris Spiegel with Leftfield, and he's going to do the full team introduction. So Chris, if you'd like to take over. Thank you all for being here.
Good evening, everyone. Everyone can hear me good? Great. So there's a lot of familiar faces in this room, and I'm happy to be speaking again before you. Myself, Phil Conti, we've been on this project for the better part of 2 years now. So being able to present the schematic design plans for you tonight is certainly a privilege for us, and we're very thankful to be a part of this project. Left to right, I'd hope the greater project team might introduce themselves. Jeff?
Jeff Bento from SLAM.
Kathy Ellithorpe from SLAM.
Tony Mergito with Gilbane. Philip Conte, Studio Jade.
Kate and Brian. So just as a reference, the SLAM Collaborative is our architect of record. Gilbane is our construction manager. Phil Conti with Studio Jade is our engineer of record, and Leftfield, myself represented here, we are your owner's project managers. There are a number of other entities that are part of this project: specialty engineering firms, acoustical consultants, educational programming consultants. All of those work under our general umbrella. They have definitely informed what you're about to see tonight. But we don't want to have 100 people before you tonight. I'd like to piggyback off what Kate said. This is a very iterative process by design and by RIDE regulations. So the design that we show you tonight, it is inevitable that the design that we show you tonight will change to what is finally constructed. That is a natural part of this programming process as we move forward through the design to ensure that it comes in on time and on budget. So I did just want to say that as well. If we could go to the next slide, please. So we did our introductions. We'll talk about goal settings. We'll go over a brief project update. We'll take a look at where we currently are in the schematic design. We'll talk about some high performance building goals. We'll move into our schedule and our next steps, and then we'll open it up with other topics of interest. And of course, if you have any questions, we'd like this to be conversational as best we can. So if you see something and something jumps out at you and you don't want to wait till the end, please just let us know. Hopefully we can address it in the moment, if that's okay with the other members of the group. Next slide, please. Let's keep going. So we already did the introduction, so we'll keep going as well. I guess I got a little bit ahead of myself here. I apologize. So our objectives for tonight is to inform, first and foremost, and to listen to your feedback. This is an opportunity for your questions, your comments, and concerns. And this is just one of many feedback mechanisms that we have designed for this project. You can always go to the website, skschoolproject.com, and submit a question via the Contact Us form. I would also encourage those that are interested to sign up for updates. There's an update usually about once every 3 weeks that comes out as well. And of course, if you see a member of your project team, but more importantly, you see one of your school building committee members or your school committee members, you can always reach out to them and they'll make sure that we get the questions as well. So there are many different feedback mechanisms throughout this process. And having said that, as we move forward through each phase of design, there are 3: schematic, design development, and construction documentation. We take your feedback and we incorporate it into the design. It is a living design that we keep moving forward. Next slide, please. Next, please. So we are currently in schematic design. As I said, it is the first of 3 phases. These phases also have a RIDE checkpoint. So once we've completed schematic design, we go to RIDE. Once we've completed design development, we go to RIDE. Once we've completed construction documentation, we go to RIDE. At the end of this process, we will be able to tell you exactly where every single tree is going to be on this property, the color of every single wall. Right now, we are nowhere near that point. These are very conceptual, they're schematic. But as we move forward and we further hone the design, every little detail of the design will be drawn out by our architectural team that we have here. At each one of these gates as well, there is an estimating process. The construction manager, Gil Bain, will estimate the documents, and we will also engage an independent third-party cost estimator to it. Why are we doing this? Because as part of the construction management process, Gil Bain will be giving us what's called a guaranteed maximum price for this work. Once that guaranteed maximum price is signed, the risk of bringing the project on budget, for the most part, falls under Gil Bain at that point. There's a lot of caveats in terms of existing conditions and things like that. But our third-party cost estimator helps us make sure that the numbers that we are proceeding with the GMP, the guaranteed maximum price, align with current market conditions out there. So it's another check and balance, as it were, over the whole process. We have had numerous initial programming meetings with everyone from the theater department to the choral teachers, to the food service representatives, to the sustainability committee. We have had multiple opportunities to get as much feedback from the stakeholders and, more importantly, the end users that are going to be using this building. All of that feedback to date has been incorporated into the design. In terms of our geothermal test well, which some of you might be a little bit more interested in, we have completed our geothermal test well. If you, right where those 2 chairs, if you look straight out, about 100 yards, that's where our current geothermal test well is. We are waiting on the feasibility study to see if this site is conducive to geothermal HVAC systems. And of course, once we go through this process here, we will be seeking approval from both the school building committee, the school building committee, the school committee, and the town council to submit our schematic design submission to the Rhode Island Department of Education for their sign off as well. So again, a number of feedback mechanisms are going forward. There's a number of ways that we incorporate feedback, and there's a large system of checks and balances that govern this work. Not just our internal checks and balances, but also the Rhode Island Department of Education as well. Next slide, please. Next one. So tonight we're going to be showing you the building site plan, floor plans, a concept rendering of the exterior. I don't want people to get too hung up right now on colors or things like that. Very early schematic design, as I said. And then we'll touch on Curtis Corner Athletic Field. And I think with that, I'd like to turn it over to the architectural team to go through the rest of the presentation, and I'll check back with you guys around slide 17, I think.
Thank you, Chris. I'm Jeff Bento from SLAM Collaborative. I'm here to give you a overview of where we currently are with the schematic design for the new South Kingstown High School. If you could go to the next slide, please. So what we're looking at here is the building site plan, proposed site plan for the school. So just to give everyone a little bit of context, on the left-hand side of the site plan, we have Columbia Street running north to south. And then on the bottom of the site plan there, we have School Street, and that's running east to west. And then we have the building outline along the bottom right-hand corner that represents the building footprint of the proposed South Kingstown High School. South of that, we have a parent drop-off lane, which would be accessed from School Street. And then along that parent drop-off lane would be visitor parking. On the east side of the building, we have an access lane that's accessed from School Street, runs up the site. And then on the far east side, we have staff parking. And then as you loop around the building, that's where we have the bus drop-off lane. And then above that, we have student parking above that bus drop-off lane. And then above the student parking lot is where we have grassed practice fields. And that is currently where the existing high school sits right now. So that'll be taken down, and practice fields, grass fields would be developed in place of the high school. And then lastly, the smaller building footprint on the west side of the proposed high school, that is the hazard building, which would be on this side of the school over there, and that it will be existing to remain. And we have a spot between the hazard building and proposed high school, that circular spot, that's where we're designated outdoor learning area. Still further to be developed, obviously, but that's where we intend the outdoor learning area to be. It would be right outside the cafeteria space. And if you can go to the next slide, we'll make our way inside the building.
Before we do that, I just would love to, if anybody has any questions or needs a little bit more clarification on orientation, please raise your hand and we'll make sure you understand. Chris, we have.
Hi. Sure. So this is the hazard building, which is right out that window right here. We're currently sitting about right here within the cafeteria. Well, because some parts of this site plan are contingent upon the building being demolished after we build and we shift the students in. So it's called construction sequencing. We have a whole construction sequencing plan as part of this project, but it's very common in school constructions and on sites like this that you stagger the construction. East Providence is a great example of how this was done recently, where you build the building, you shift the students in, and then you complete the field work and some of the other exterior work once the students have moved in. So you want to go into this too, Kathy? Or?
We're actually sitting where the outdoor learning space would be currently. So where that circle is right there, a little off to the right, that's where we currently are on the site.
So this would be something that the school would open. We would shift our students in, and then we would build a safe barricade in order to keep students and the construction substantially separate, which is something that's very common in what we're doing right now. And then this would be a phase 2 of the project. So we would then demolish the existing school and build the additional, this outdoor learning space and the fields over to where those are. It's a multi-phased project.
Hey, Jeff, let me add some context to that. So there is no overlap between the new construction and the existing building. So they do not touch. They will be separated. We will build the new building. Then we will demolish the old building and finish the site work.
Yeah, okay. Does the topology change? Like the hill that comes around there for where you turn on School Street? Or, you know, do you know what I'm saying? Are you gonna grade off? Is it all gonna be flat?
So we're building on this flat site out here right now. So we're not going to be touching this grade change that's over here. It doesn't make sense for us to mess with the grades because
I
that
didn't-
costs substantial money. But Tony, do you want to weigh in on that as well?
But when you keep saying that right behind there is where the other high school was, that's down the hill.
So-
That's just confusing to me.
Go ahead, Phil.
After the existing building is demolished, we will be constructing those parking areas that you see and restoring the fields that are currently over at Hazard. When we do that work, it will require regrading, which is not uncommon in any construction project. Our goal is to provide you the same amount of open space that you have now at Hazard Field in the location where the existing high school is after it is demolished and the site work is completed. Does that answer your question? And I'm sorry, I can't see you who's asking the question. Okay, gotcha.
Sort of. Okay, thank you.
I asked this one Saturday morning at one of these sessions. Do we know how many parking spots exist today? How many?
I believe it's 364, more or less.
And are we getting the exact or more? Because it doesn't look that many from sitting here. I would think you'd want more parking spots so we're not parking on Old Mountain Field Road.
Get you that number. I have it written down.
Just a thought.
Jimmy, we hear you, and it's definitely part of the planning process. This representation that you're seeing isn't to scale yet, but you're heard, and it is definitely part of the conversation.
So for the high school, we have allocated 326 spaces. And then in the parking lot in front of Hazard Building right there would be 46 spaces. So 200 spaces for students in that student parking lot, 30 spaces in visitor parking in the front of the building where parent drop-off is, and then 96 spaces for staff parking over on the east side of the building.
It's this two more than there currently is, I think. If I did my math correctly.
200 students parking, 30 visitors, 96 staff parking, but could be subject to change based on once we further develop the design. That's just what we currently have at this moment in time.
At this snapshot of the design of the drawings, that's the current parking situation. If feedback is we need more or we need less, we can adjust based on what the school building committee provides insight on.
Did that include Hazard? The existing Hazard? No?
Nope, that's separate from Hazard.
Just to speak to that point, as part of our design meetings with the specialists here, when we met with the kitchen staff, we assigned them, they have a Chartwell's van that's parked here every day. So just to give everybody a kind of a peek into it, is we're going to the granular level of now planning the kitchen staff parking and the kitchen dedicated van that's on site and leaves the site every day, them to have their own loading, unloading zone within that parking. So we're definitely making sure our specialists and our building staff, students have the correct parking and the correct designated parking.
Thank you for having this tonight. Have you spoken to other school districts that have estimated how many parking spots for the construction workers they'll be using during this build? For example, if we have 20 construction workers driving every day, that would be 20 spots being used if the school and the building are going to be simultaneously being built and opened. Have you thought about that? Or have you spoken to any folks, subject matter experts that have done this already?
So I can answer that. So as part of our site logistics and phasing planning, the intent is to have all construction parking on the site through the construction of the new parking areas that we're constructing in each phase. So that's really the intent, is to pull all that trade parking onto the site into the areas that we have to create in the permanent scenario in each of those phases.
So just to add to what Tony says, there have been situations I've been in other communities that are much more urban and dense where you actually find off-site parking and transfer your crews. So as an example, a church during the week maybe doesn't use their parking lot during the week. You could have staff park there and transport them to the site. But we have a big enough site, I believe, Tony, we'll be able to keep all of our tradesmen and women on site.
Thanks for answering that. And have you spoken to anyone about what time of day construction typically happens?
We have
or-
to follow the ordinances of the town.
Great, thank you.
Hi. Do you have any data on the number of students currently that either walk or bike to school? And do you have any plans for increasing the infrastructure, bettering the infrastructure so that more students might want to feel safe walking or biking to school?
So it's a great question. So under our control is within the site. So as part of the Northeast Collaborative for High Performing Schools, which is a set of guidelines that we have to follow, we provide infrastructure on site to provide spaces for bike storage and things like that, and safe pedestrian routes inside and around the school. Once we get past our limit of disturbance, which is the site, that becomes a town discussion.
I'm gonna just jump in on that. We have our transportation subcommittee that is part of our district, and we are often tackling situation and conversation as you just brought up. Chief Moynihan with the South Kingstown Police Department is with us on that subcommittee. Also, I think it is tomorrow night, there is a ripped up meeting at the Kingston Library. I have it on my calendar personally because transportation in this community is, it needs attention. And so I appreciate your question. And I point at him because he's our transportation director for the districts, and we're often having this conversation with the town.
Done a better job introducing. I'm Dorothy Hill. I'm the chair for the Bike Pedestrian Advisory Committee. So I'm happy to work with you guys.
So you'll be at the meeting tomorrow night.
I
at
hope
Kingston
so.
Free Press.
Thank you.
I will say, I think early on in the process, we have a document. I think you guys had reached out to us as the school building committee, which we had documented at the time. So we definitely want to bring you guys into the process as we go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually had that slide in
Can you
previous
repeat the
presentation.
question?
So
The
the question was, sorry. The question was, can we superimpose the existing building over the site? Yes, we can. We actually have that slide. We didn't include it tonight. It was part of earlier presentations. It is available on the website right now. If you go to the document library, there's a presentations tab. If not, if you want to give me your email after this meeting, I'd be happy to send it to you.
Hi, I'm a teacher at the high school and I've been working with people about relocating the greenhouse we currently have to a temporary one, and I'm under the impression that there will be a permanent greenhouse with the new building. But now that I get a good look at the plan, I'm just wondering where that could be for light and things, and just hoping that that continues part of the conversation as you guys move forward with the sketch.
We're planning to locate it on the west side of the high school between the Hazard Building and the high school, that area. So once we get inside the floor plan, there will be access to get outside, right outside of where those classrooms would be.
So right over here.
Yeah, exactly where Chris is pointing, in that area.
That's, and you'll see in a second, it's close to the science labs as well, so that's part of it.
Sun-wise, south facing is School Street, right?
Yep.
So if you put it on the back corner right there, it's not gonna get any morning light until it gets past the building. So just those kinds of things being taken into account, the sun angle.
That's a great reason this process is iterative, right? We have a schematic location for it, and you're going to tell us why it's not going to work, and we're going to find a new location for it. So that's part of this process.
Moving on to the inside of the building. Next slide, please. So here we have the first floor plan of the new school building. And running over from left side to right side, on the far left, we have the 3-story academic tower, which will hold all the classrooms, lab spaces, teachers' workrooms, and so forth. On the right side of that academic tower, on the lower end, we have the main entrance vestibule, which will be accessed from the front of the building facing School Street. On the north part of that, across from that vestibule in the cyan color, we have the cafeteria space, which will be a 2-story space, and access to the steeratorium that we're calling. We're calling steeratorium on the bottom left corner of that cafeteria space. And there will also be a vestibule top left corner of the cafeteria, which will be accessed to the northern part of the site. And if we have the bus drop-off lane there, students would enter the building from the buses through that entrance right there. In the dark blue, that's where the admin spaces would be, the guidance suite, and the nurse suite. The bottom right-hand corner of the plan in the light purple, that's where we would have the auditorium space facing the platform. And then behind that, on the far right, we have a choral room and band room space. And then above that on the green, we have the gymnasium space, and then locker rooms and support spaces on that right-hand side. And then the far right of the plan in the magenta color, we have CTE spaces. So that's the first floor plan. If you move to the second floor plan on the next slide.
Do we want to stop
Or
per
one
floor?
stop, sure.
Okay, great. We have one question. We have a couple.
Because clearly I'm not like looking. Online yet. Yeah.
So it will, after tonight, now that we've made it public, it will be available on the website, skschoolproject.com. Shameless plug for the website. We'll have a button. As soon as you click on the website, you'll see presentation. So it'll be front and center when you go to the website.
Okay, just because I know that for my kiddos, oh, sorry.
No, sorry, just someone asked me to skschoolproject.com.
Oh, my name is Amber Lambert. I work here at the high school. So just like you mentioned, the nurse office. So like for me, selfishly, I want to make sure my classes are there. I'm the life skills teacher. Like near in that vicinity. That's why I want to like kind of see exactly what's there. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So somebody came in like wish list. Woo, this is what I'd love to have, but there are some things I really need to have, so to say. That makes sense.
To assume that you
Yeah.
had conversations with leadership, Chip.
No, there were people from, that came in and were like, what do you want? What do you need? And so.
Okay.
I asked and.
Yeah, this was May of last year.
Okay.
Just like.
Yeah, I believe you
usually
met
wanted
with
some
Kristen.
feedback, So I just want to make sure.
Kristen Furtex, our programmer, and I
Okay.
believe you might have met with her.
Yeah.
So they'll be going back out and doing another round of back and forth fine tuning
Yeah.
in design
Maybe
development
just a
phase.
note, as you said, the nurses are there.
Yeah.
Sorry. Oh, that.
Yeah.
Hi, I have a couple of questions. The gymnasium that I see in the green, do we have an additional like back gym like we have right now, to accommodate multiple sports going on at one time?
So we have a fitness center allocated upstairs, which we're intending to be a flexible space for other sports to happen simultaneously if sports are happening on the first floor of the gymnasium. We intend that space to be a flexible space.
We have additional athletic areas on the second floor we'll get to in a second, which we'll show you.
Okay, so for example, basketball and wrestling are going on at the same time. Wrestling right now goes in the back gym, basketball is obviously on the court. Where would somebody like wrestling go? They would be able to, all the mats would be upstairs in like that extra fitness room? How is that gonna work?
This is a great question that we have been hashing out with our athletic director, Mr. Lynch. The conversation is continuing because of just your point that you made. And we're in the process of continuing to have that discussion so that we can make sure that we have that ability and that flexibility as our sports are implemented.
Awesome. I have another question. As a lifelong resident of South Kingstown, I feel like sometimes we think in the moment and not the future. And I realize that our population is dwindling right now for our students. But do we have additional room for this school to grow? If in 10 years from now, we get 200 more kids, do we have the spacing to accommodate, or are we going to have to come back to this and now add on?
So it's a beautiful question. I'm glad you asked it. And that is, we continuously have that point driven home that we don't want to make, we want to make sure that we are not designing to 2027, but that we're designing to 2035, 45, 50. And that's an ongoing conversation that we have with our architects and our designers. And we will get to that topic as we move along through this and discuss the use of the hazard building and the way that it is currently utilized and how it may be utilized in the future. But it's a phenomenal question and that we're continuously hashing out this.
So before Phil talks about the stage 2, I will say that the way that these projects are designed and funded by the Rhode Island Department of Education is based on a demographic study, which looks out 5 years. Generally, RIDE holds you very specifically to what that demographic study lists. Phil, as part of the stage 2, was very successful, and we actually got approval to build bigger than our current population, which is not a common occurrence. So I believe our enrollment, is it 80 more students that we have funding for?
We received funding for 725 students,
Mhm.
which is, I don't know do you know how much the current enrollment is? 688.
So but again, and to your other point about futuring these schools. So one of the things about 21st century educational design and construction, and I'm sure the architects will weigh in here if they need to, but it's that spaces are designed to be flexible so that they can adjust to bubbles, or if one program, as an example, has a lot of students that are really interested in it, you can shift so that not every room that is being designed right now necessarily has to stay that way in 10 years. We're not building this school. So this school, as an example, was built out of very heavy masonry construction, right? It is very difficult for us to change room sizes because the structural supports for this building are everywhere that you see in front of it. A 21st century design school has the ability to flex based on your needs because of just how the building materials and how the building is designed. We don't have a ton of masonry walls that we have to knock down in order to expand room sizes and things like that. So flexibility is a hallmark of 21st century educational design. This building is being designed with 21st century educational design. Kathy, Jeff, did I miss anything?
No, you said it well.
Just out of curiosity, and I'm not the music teacher. Is there going to be direct access from those choral and band rooms into the auditorium? Is that in the plan?
Yes. Yep. Yeah, that lighter purple you see there, that's a access corridor behind where the platform of the auditorium would be, and then the band and choral room would be.
The question was how many seats in the auditorium?
On the first floor, there's 524, I think. And then on the second floor, there's 168, I believe. So in total, I think about 700, 724, 750, somewhere around there. We have the exact number on the plans.
Generally, RIDE will reimburse you with your student population, your demographic report. So if your demographic report says 725, you build an auditorium for 725, they will reimburse you for 725. As a general reminder, this new school is 100,000 square feet smaller than the current building that you're in. So that's 100,000 square feet less to heat, 100,000 square feet less to cool, 100,000 less feet to clean for Brian and his staff. It's the equivalent of taking the entire Broad Rock Middle School out of this building, to give you an idea of how much the building size has changed.
The one thing I want to add, so over the last several years, as we were going through the stage 1 and stage 2 process, you've seen a number of floor plans. But I can tell you from being involved from the very beginning that SLAM did a great job in maintaining the overall concept of the school, which was very simple. A clear line of circulation so the administration can supervise the building, a separation of the public spaces, the gym, the auditorium, the larger CTE spaces, all of that, the cafeteria, separate from the academic core so the building can be multi-use, multifunctional for the community. So they did a really good job, and I can just tell you, as being involved several years ago, that the intent remains consistent. And that's a very strong and positive message that I wanted to convey.
Second floor? So again, moving left to right in the plan, left-hand side, we have the second floor of the academic tower. In between there, we have a corridor, which acts as a balcony over the cafeteria space on the north part of that corridor. And then bottom, we have the vestibule looking down below. Then as we make our way further into the building on the right-hand side, we have media center spaces, various lab spaces. The purple down below on the right, bottom right-hand corner, we have the second floor balcony in the auditorium, and that overlooks down into the platform. And then in the green, we have a walking track around the gymnasium in the center portion there. You can look down below into the gym space. And then we have that fitness room / flexible athletic space over on the right-hand corner of that walking track.
Hey, Jeff, one thing I want to add is that it's important to the folks at RIDE that we integrate CTE or pathway spaces into the floor plan of the building, with the exception of construction tech, which needs some larger spaces. We've integrated all of those pathway spaces, very close to the academic tower and within the core of the building at the second floor.
So for those, just because we use a lot of acronyms, CTE stands for Career and Technical Education. And then also, I just wanted to point out, you'll notice that within each of these academic tower, you'll notice teacher planning spaces. These are critical so that teachers have a place to not only work with their counterparts in terms of educational programming, but also for supervision of spaces as well.
And then the third floor is just limited to the academic tower. That's the only portion of the school that will be 3 stories tall.
And I think you may have seen that basically the academic tower, the first floor, second floor, and third floor are all very similar. They're all stacked. We're trying to maximize the efficiencies within those spaces.
And then the next slide, this represents our concept rendering as of right now. This is a view looking from School Street to the front of the building. On the far left side of the building, we have the three-story academic tower, which should be mostly cladded with brick. And then you'll see windows to the classrooms, and then in between those classroom windows, we have a different style of brick. We call it rusticated brick, which is essentially brick. It's just a different pattern of brick to give it a textured aesthetic. And then we have a stone material at the corner of the academic tower facing this way. That's where the stair tower would be. And that is granite. We're trying to take elements of the town's architecture, like I know the town hall is cladded in granite as well, so we're trying to implement that back into the new school building. On the right-hand side of that academic tower, we have the administration spaces and the main entrance to the building. And that folding blue plane, the blue represents the school colors, and that would be a metal panel material. And then behind that, cladding the administration spaces and the lab spaces at the second floor. We're trying to incorporate a board and batten aesthetic, but it would essentially be a fiber cement material. And a lot of coastal architecture has the board and batten aesthetic, so we're trying to incorporate that into the high school. And then as you move further to the right, we have the vestibule into the theater lobby, which you would be able to access the auditorium through the theater lobby. And then the auditorium space that would be cladded with brick as well. And then in front of that, we have the parent drop-off, visitor parking, and again, loop to back to School Street. And that's where we currently stand. So like we said, some adjustments might be made, but this is the overall aesthetic concept that we're trying to achieve for the high school.
So again, everything that you've seen today, from the floor plans to the design concept rendering, is subject to change as we move forward through the design. It is an iterative process. The things that will not change are generally where the building is located on the site. You will most likely have a small three-story academic tower. You will need parking. You will need the fields located up there as well. But if you've been following this project for the last 2 years, what we're showing you today should not be much of a surprise. It is very much like the design of the building that was estimated as part of the Stage 2 submission. It's very much like the design that was voted on as part of the bond referendum. Not much in terms of the overall design has changed. The locations of spaces, the sizes, some of those spaces, we have additions such as the walking track and things like that. But for the most part, nothing should be a surprise to you for this design. Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
One thing I wanted to point out before Doral asked the question, this is a sloped roof for photovoltaics or solar panels is another way of putting it, Doral.
Is this a good time for me to say something about floor plan? Then, yeah, okay. So, I'm representing the science department at the high school, and one of the changes that we've seen from the last drawing to the current drawing is the location of the different science labs. Am I right in saying now they're on separate floors?
Yeah, that's the orange spaces right there.
Yeah, so in the previous plan, they were all on the same floor, and now they're on separate floor, and we have concerns about that in terms of use, because right now, science that we work on down one corridor, and we share a lot of equipment, and so chemical storage is something then that would have to be on multiple floors. And also made the fact that it's going to be a smaller building, so I think that we'll be sharing spaces perhaps even more. And so in terms of sharing materials, if we're on separate floors, that'll be challenging. In terms of, sticking your head in your neighbor's room and being like, I can't find the pipettes, did you move them?
Yep.
That sort of thing. That being on different floors presents some challenges that we're not really looking forward to.
Understood, and thanks for the feedback. Our intent was to stack the labs because it would make it easier to pipe in for hoods and the infrastructure and whatnot, and it's more cost effective to stack the labs rather than distribute them all out throughout the floor. So
Yeah.
that was our intent.
Yeah, I had communicated with Dr. McGarren and he explained that to me for the reason of it. But I just feel compelled to, since the labs are going to be a very lasting feature, that's not something that can be flexible. Just the idea that they're all going to be spread out in the long term, I think people would regret and would say, who said this would be a good idea? And I just want to go down for the record, like, I don't think that's a good idea.
Okay, no, we
and
appreciate
because
it.
Before, I think you had the labs back to back. There were 4 labs and they were back to back, and I assume the back to back makes it easy for the plumbing and ventilation.
Because they could share the same
Yeah,
chase
so I
wall. Yep.
understand the challenge with that, but I think having them near each other in the building is better in terms of the use of the rooms, the, how it works in the day to day. So.
No, thank you for the feedback. Appreciate it.
So in today's architecture, windows in a building like this, because it's going to be heated and cooled, unlike this building, which just didn't have any air conditioning. So the windows in this school will not open. Is that correct?
They will open.
Yeah, we have requirements for the Rhode Island Department of Education about the sizes of the windows, how much daylighting we have. It's all very, very specified in the Northeast Collaborative for High Performing Schools, which is, as you're aware, Doral sets a lot of caveats to this.
Plus for safety, I guess, right? If you had to get a fire department in there.
I mean, they're not, it's not gonna open up all the way, Doral. I don't think your 6'6" frame is gonna be able to fit through. We know each other pretty well by now, I think.
Question. I like the gymnasium that you showed. It looks bright, modern, high ceiling with this second floor walking track and fitness area. Kind of reminds me of the East Providence school that I know Gilbane built. I was just curious, because I haven't seen too many square tracks. Is it a way, because I know this isn't the final product, to round those off and make it more of an oval? So it's more
Yeah,
useful?
so it's a walking track. I think with striping, you might be able to achieve that, but in general, curves cost a lot more money than straight angles. So I'm going to say this, and you're probably going to hear me say it a lot more over the next 6 months. We don't want to let perfect be the enemy of the good. So if we can get you guys a walking track on budget, but it doesn't have rounded corners, I think that's very successful. But we can achieve rounding with striping, right? You can, the way you paint the floors is an easier way for us to provide that similar feeling without actually structurally changing the building design. Did I say anything that's not true, Slam?
It's true.
And we can look at easing those edges, which right now are literally 90-degree corners. We can look at easing that edge as you would go around, but it's not meant to be a running track where you're, really banking your
Right,
turns.
right. Is there dimensions there? Like there's a certain distance, it's 1/10 of a mile, or it's, I can't tell the dimensions from here.
I don't think we know that.
Along the perimeter, yeah. I
That'll
don't-
be the
We'll-
first
we'll
question.
Find that out, but yeah,
Is
we.
that
we
teacher
can
app?
All I have to
we
do
can
is draw a
talk to
line.
measure that That way.
Yeah.
You're not holding track meets there, though.
Indoor track meets?
That'd be pretty cool, but
Nice.
not this project.
There are 1 or 2 staircases in the 3-story classroom.
Two.
Two in an elevator
Two in an elevator. How many exits?
on the ground floor
On the first floor?
Sure,
throughout the building or just in the academic tower?
in the academic tower,
There's at least three.
at least three. Okay,
So as part of this project, we have a code consultant who specifically, and then also as part of this project, we have to meet with what are called authorities having jurisdiction. Example of authorities having jurisdiction is your fire department, the police department. So they all have the ability to input on this design. And one of the only ways RIDE will allow you to really change stuff is if an authority having jurisdiction. That's one of the only ways you can actually get more money into a project is if an authority having jurisdiction says, you need to have this. One of the only ways RIDE will actually let you have more money for a project.
thanks for walking us through that.
Yeah.
The vestibule in the front, when a visitor enters the building, there will be two doors, locked doors that they'll have to enter in order to get free reign of the school. Is that correct?
Yes, all of the secure vestibules have two separate doors and I don't want to get into specific security features in a public meeting.
Sure.
But there are security features. So as you can see here, this is the main vestibule, two sets of doors, the main student entrance, two sets of doors, the main academic tower exit, two sets of doors, two sets of doors, two sets of doors. And then you also notice throughout the building as access control points. So this is a great example of how we can use this building when the school isn't in session because you can seal off sections of the building from public participation. So public, I don't know what I'm doing to it. But what I'm trying to say is that the building has been thoughtfully designed so that let's say you've got something in the cafeteria, you can seal off all the other areas so the public can only go into the cafeteria.
Sure. So when they buzz in, they get let in, they walk in, and there is a glass window.
There's a transaction window,
There's a
yeah,
transaction
like a
window, that's
bank
correct?
window. Mhm.
Great. I appreciate that. It's really great for safety for the school.
So I want to piggyback on your questions. So a couple things. This is not the final floor plan. That will not be released to the public for safety reasons.
Sure.
Our architects, engineers, project team, we've met with Chief Moynihan, Town Manager Manny, and who are very passionate about our school safety. Mr. Manny himself has been involved in school safety protocol for decades in his various capacities prior to him coming to South Kingstown as our manager, and understand that our student safety is definitely one of the top priorities along with our educational programs. So please know that those meetings are ongoing and happening. And like I said, the final floor plan in detail will not be released to the public for safety reasons.
That's reassuring to hear. Thank you.
And I appreciate that line of questioning. Thank you.
As you can imagine, I mentioned we have a huge project team. One of the members of that project team is a security consultant, specifically a school safety.
And just to speak a little further about the meetings we've had going on for months and months now too, is looking at the design that has been put in front of us. Specifically, one of the parts of the building we looked at was our special education being towards the front side of the building and having an exit, a secure exit near that program. So when they're getting on the busing after school, they're not having to go all the way to through the building, back of the building to get out. They can get, in case of emergency or their daily busing, all our special education students go right out in a secure exit out of the building near where the busing will be for those programs. And also too, to speak to Chris's point and Kate's point, without going into too many details, every single exit point of this building will be brought up to modern standard compared to our older buildings and above. Again, working with specialists, working with our representatives in town, we've looked at every door, and we've had specific meetings just on doors, cameras, and access control systems for that exact feature, because we live in a different world nowadays, unfortunately.
We'll put these in the budget.
Forgive me for asking another question, but I'm really concerned. I've been here from the beginning, a long time ago. Can you put it back to the first floor? And can you come over here? Now, I'm a parent and I want to see a gear production from the elementary students, so I want to go into the theater or stage. Can you show me where I'm going to enter? And then after that, show me, I'm a fan of the wrestling or basketball game. Where am I going to come from and where am I going to enter? Because I
So-
just, like here, I know there's a entryway. Can you
So-
can you come over here and show me
Yeah.
where my car is and how I'm gonna enter the
So-
building for a musical first?
So musicals are big, right? You guys have an awesome musical theater
Yes.
program. So in that situation, in terms of a musical, if we're having the full, and Kathy and Jeff, please help, but there's a theater specific entrance right here. This is specifically for a theater lobby to give you that grand entrance. There is a ticket office, there's a control room, there's a lighting control room. There's 2 entrances here as well. There's, so this is the main theater entrance. There are also additional entrances specific to the gyms as well. You can see here's a couple as well. I have a feeling that for a lot of events, this might be an entrance. This back entrance as well would be a main entrance because you've got 200 parking spaces at least back there as well. But again, it's the ability for us to close off parts of the building that we don't want you guys to go into and to shift traffic into the areas that we do want you to go to, which is the access, it's called access control.
So it looks like you're still tweaking the entrance for athletic event because that doesn't look like a. great
Yeah,
entrance.
so you're absolutely right. That's something we've already been discussing. It came up in one of our, when we showed this to our stakeholders. The greenhouse was something that came up. This is something that came up as well. The wrestling room was something that came up.
There, just to speak to that, but there is also an additional parking lot on the right side of the building over here with an additional vestibule entrance, which will again be part of the discussion for events.
Yeah, you would just want to sell a ticket or for a refreshment close to the athletic contest, not go through the entire building to get there. I think, but
The question is about two-way traffic on site.
Yes.
And the idea of keeping it is getting as much traffic off of school in Columbia as possible, getting as many cars to line up on our site so that we're not backing up traffic. And I have seen kids peel out of this parking lot at the end of the school day. So if we could do some traffic calming on site as well, I'm sure everybody would be appreciative of it.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
So we're not done yet. Yeah, but if you want to leave, we haven't even gotten to the athletic complex. So as with the stage 2 design, it's an iterative process for the high school. So was the athletic complex. These are several ideas that are kicking around. This isn't as developed yet, and I'll turn it over to Phil to talk about it.
Thanks, Chris. So we're looking at the options available to us at the Curtis Corner site. We know there are some major components to this project, such as the new track, the new field, making sure we have all of the amenities associated with a high school complex. There's a couple things we want to recognize and inform you of is that the district admin office building is at this time intended to remain. Obviously, the building come down and reorient the site. So it's a little bit more of a sense of arrival. Right now, you get to the Parkland by going behind the district office. We want to fix that while we have this opportunity here. We're looking at a variety of options for that track and field location. This is an opportunity for you to voice your opinion on a number of things. Synthetic turf, natural grass. We want maximized parking for 1,000 cars, or no, we want to minimize the amount of paving and park on the grass as we need to, like we are now. So there's a lot more fluidity associated with this part of the project. So I certainly welcome your opinions. We've been working with the administration, with the athletic department on what their non-negotiables are, what we need, whether it's a 6-lane running track or an 8-lane running track. So I want to open the floor up to some of your comments on what you think this site will look like in the end, or any opinions you have on athletic amenities.
So I think one thing that we would, if you don't feel comfortable speaking in front of a large group, please again, reach out through the project website, skschoolproject.com. We know there is a lot of debate currently in Rhode Island about turf versus natural grass fields. We're still examining all of our options on that as well. The reason that this plan isn't as defined yet is because the high school is going to take much longer to build, and it's going to be the much more expensive part of the project. So we're trying to nail that down, and then we put all of the pieces of this plan into place here.
So a football field should be optimally oriented north to south, right?
Preferred, yes.
So when I look at those 4 different things there, am I seeing the north to south in every one of those, or am I not?
You're seeing north to south is in the left to right direction of what you see on the screen.
Okay.
Yes, and we're looking to improve that, make that a little bit more organized. So this is an opportunity to fix that site for administration, to access the fields in the back, as well as the work that we're going to be doing here.
Perhaps from South Road or another entry point?
I would say no, not at this time, because we're only working under the area of land that is under the command and control of the school department.
Understood. Thank you.
So I have a couple of questions. Well, at first I think I have a comment. I think my comment is, again, I said I was a lifelong resident here. I'm looking for something that's going to attract people to this district, keep people in this district, and build something that people are going to be excited to go to. So when you say, like, do you want a 6-lane or 8-lane track? For me, it doesn't really matter. But like, as both of my kids are super athletic and we go to all these other facilities, they're top notch. And my hope is that this district builds something that we can do a one and done scenario and not have to keep coming back and reinventing the wheel. So I don't know much about track. My son runs track, but I don't know if we need 6 lanes or 8 lanes, but we need something where we can host meets here. We can make money and bring money to this district. We need to have, I think we need to have turf. That seems to be the way everybody is going. Why would we want to keep up with grass and all of those other kinds of things? I think my biggest concern is, and I may have heard this incorrectly, so please correct me, is that the school is going to come first and then this. Is that correct? Like, when is this going to be finished?
I mean, finished in terms of when is this going to be? When
Like-
can kids play on it?
Yeah, like
Okay.
when can kids use this? Can we play football there in a year and a half? Can we?
Yeah, we still don't have that sequencing part worked out yet.
The school,
yeah,
school construction is going to take much longer than this.
yeah, the school construction will take the better part of 2 years. This won't take 2 years. So the idea, hopefully, is that if they open at the same time, certainly not staggered where you build the school first and then the athletic complex. But if we've been exploring opportunities to open this up earlier, because we know that our construction is going to put some stress on Terry in terms of the athletic fields that he currently uses over here. So we're looking at sequencing to see if we can bring it on earlier. But in general, the design process is we're trying to, because the design of the school will take so much longer, our current schematic design effort is focused on that. That doesn't mean that we're neglecting this. It just means that this part right now still has a lot of unknowns as opposed to where we currently are with the high school.
So unknowns as far as you're trying to get resident feedback, unknowns because you haven't done something with the land, like what is?
There's a lot of site constraints that we have to deal with. We want to hear about turf versus natural gas because that has a tax, that has a cost impact to the site. Talking about items that may not have been in the stage 2, such as a concession stand and things like that. What do the bleachers look like? What does the press box look like? Are we going to add pickleball courts? All of these types of things are all being kicked around. The scope of work isn't as defined as the scope of work for the high schools. But this is the opportunity, not
At
just
this
now.
point, right? It's a constant evolving conversation. Today at from 2 to 3:30, we had a meeting with Terry, with Chip, with our architects, engineers, exploring just this. So it is an ongoing conversation, and it's not as defined as our high school because obviously our educational programs come first, and we have to stay within our budget and our means. And so we have to play that game of prioritizing, but also trying to drive to make sure everything is going off at around the same time.
But there is a separate defined budget just for this work. So we do want to be clear about that. There is 13, I don't know the exact number off the top of my head. I have to look at it. It's on the website though. Keep plugging that website. There's a separate budget for this athletic work that we have. So as to not compromise, we understand what your point is about with school choice the way it is in Rhode Island. Let's be honest, half of North Kingstown soccer team lives in Warwick, right? We know that in order to keep kids into the district, you have to have competitive sports programs and competitive sports facilities. That is not lost on us by any means.
So, just thinking about our neighboring districts, some things that really appeal when I go to these other facilities are like bathrooms. Sorry. And a concession stand. Sorry. A concession stand or a merch stand. Those are all real appealing to people. Selling South Kingstown, so to say. And when I had to pay $6 for a bag of popcorn, I was like, not that that was the money getter, but kind of like getting people. I just went to NK and that's exactly what they had. So.
Yeah, so we have to, all under consideration. We've also been meeting with really concerned parents as well, or not, with other parent groups as well, the boosters. I don't know if I could say that. The boosters, we've been meeting with the boosters as well. We just need to be careful that some things like concession stands are not reimbursable to the Rhode Island Department of Education. So we have a pretty set reimbursement rate for this project. We just want to make sure that we're giving you everything that we promised as part of the stage 2. Additional stuff outside of that may not be reimbursable.
So I guess, and I think at one point a year ago or something, there was no consideration for restrooms within.
There is a huge consideration
Okay,
for
so I was
restrooms.
like, okay, I remember hearing like that might not be part of the plan, so I was like, I don't know, maybe it was original stages. And of course, I have to say, go sod, sorry, selfishly, I would like natural grass.
It's a
Take notes.
debate across, we know, there's pluses and minuses to both, right?
Oh, yeah.
Especially if you're planning on using this for a ton of time. You might have to close it for, if you use sod, to close it, to allow growing season, to allow the grass to replenish itself. You know, there's costs associated with the maintenance of turf fields. It's going to be an exercise, that's for sure.
There we go. Oh. To piggyback a little bit on this, the athletic complex, the gym and the theater are the largest billboards for the town of South Kingstown, right? Not just for the school system, they're for everything. And unfortunately for us right now, the gym and the theater are billboards for South Kingstown. So I think as you're, to piggyback on what Mr. Champ said there, in looking at that design, you really have to be, we have kind of one shot to make sure that we have, it doesn't have to be the Taj Mahal, but you have to have a well thought out entrance. Having the theater entrance on the front where there's no parking when everyone's going to be parking in the back doesn't do us any good, right? Our theaters are very busy, as we know. The gym is very busy. I just say, as you guys are going forward with the design concepts, just make sure that it's real intentional, right? We need people, think about when people pull up, park and walk in and go, wow, this is South Kingstown. Right now, they pull up the side of the building under the tree that's going to fall down on the parking lot that looks like this. You know, I mean, in the dark, you know, sometimes the lights don't work. It's important to make sure that all that stuff, because like these guys are all saying, this is what's going to attract athletes, you know, musical parents, and students, you know, to the school. It's got to have that wow factor. When in support of the bond, I said this a couple of different times. I'd sat in the gym for gymnastics tournaments with my daughter and listened to people talk about the school behind me, you know, what a dump this place is and yada, yada, you know. It does matter to people, the aesthetic part of it. So just make sure that that's intentional, because we do have one shot probably to make it right, with the entrances and all.
Feedback.
So this is the football field and that's where they'll practice? Do they have to go all the way over there to practice?
So, operations, I'll leave to Terry. I don't know, Terry, if you wanted to weigh in, on the operations of the new Curtis Corner complex.
Design, it depends on where we're at, turf or natural grass. That'll depend on how our practices will be scheduled. So I don't have that answer at this point. If it's turf, we'll schedule all our practices over there. If it's not, then we'll have to schedule practices around that.
And if indeed that is the case, then you'll have a bus or you'll have to transport everybody.
Yeah, we've been busing our kids for years. Our soccer team goes out to practice at Tuckertown right now, so we have to get transportation. So that's something that we're used to and we've been doing for years.
Well, this all sounds very exciting, very complex, especially when you get the different viewpoints from science or football or whatever. However, in the beginning, when you made the introduction, did I hear that you've extended yourself and now you need to pull it back? And then the second comment was on time and on budget, keeping that in mind. Did I hear that correctly in terms of where you are now?
So right now, the current building is about 160,000 square feet. We'd like to get that down.
Can you go back to the first floor plan, please? Thank you.
So right now, the current floor plan is about 160,000 square feet. We want to get that down closer to 150,000. Does that mean that I'm going to lop off an entire section of the building at 10,000 square feet? No, it's not how you do this. How you do this is by finding efficiencies within the building plans, is by making very small adjustments that are probably not noticeable, but when you start adding up square footage costs, they really start to make money. It is very common, in fact, on every project I've ever worked on, that when you are at this phase, you have to pull back a little bit in order to make sure that you're on budget. Now, it's just part of the iterative process. We will continue to evaluate not just at schematic design, but at design development and construction documentation so that we make sure that we're moving through and the project is on budget. So again, where we are is a very natural part in the design. When you start with your schematic design, you really want to get not just all of the needs, but all of the wants. And then as you start to move through the budget process, you start to condense it and say, prioritize some of those wants. Make sure you have all the needs, but then you prioritize some of those wants.
Thank you.
Hey, Chris, I'd like to go back to the floor plan just for a moment. So, I've had the opportunity of working with Kathy and her group since 2010. So I'm comfortable jumping into their design as an architect. But I want to explain the design intent so you understand about coming to this new facility for either theatrical or athletic events. The South Kingstown High School is going to be sold not only by the character of the auditorium, which will look fabulous, as well as the gym, but it's going to be right here, the student commons and the cafeteria. This will be the premier entrance point for visitors and students and staff. This is going to be a grand two-story space with a lot of light looking out onto the fields. This is adjacent to those 200 parking spots there, as well as right off the main entrance. So I expect that any major event, either at the auditorium or the gym, really has free function in this cafeteria space as people are coming in here and here. Yes, we have a theatrical entrance and that'll work fine, but the majority of people are going to come to a very grand two-story space. This space will be isolated. It's what we call an isolated wow, right? This is where we could spend some money on the aesthetics that will impact everybody, the students every day at lunch, visitors for major events. So I could probably almost tell you, not going to create multiple grand entrances. It's just not in the budget. It just doesn't happen. The idea is to strategically locate these major common spaces so that people can have a pleasant experience, have a pre-function space, access, food, beverage, et cetera, in a space that's set up for that with very close proximity to group bathrooms and then your gym and your auditorium. Keep in mind, this plan is not like what you have today, a queue at this building. This is very clearly defined in terms of circulation. No one will get lost in this building. It will be very easy to figure out where you're going. So I just wanted to sort of stop that discussion so no one's expecting in a next design to see a grand theatrical entrance, because it's really going to be right here at the students' commons area.
Yeah, just because we're in a cafeteria right now, right? This is not what the cafeteria is going to look like. It's going to be a grand two-story space. All of those career and technical education spaces, the more dynamic mission-specific spaces, are going to be overlooking, so you can actually see into some of these more dynamic spaces and things like that. I wish we had sort of a rendering of what these large statement stairs look like in new buildings as well. We'll have one of those, I think, for the next meeting. It's certainly not walking into a room like this at all.
That's what we do in DD.
Get it? I'm not an architect, can you tell?
Next slide. Oh, sorry.
Okay, I'm a little confused here. The science labs and everything, you're cutting cost, but you're adding cost to aesthetics?
Cutting any costs from the science
But
labs.
you said you couldn't put all the labs together because of cost.
So
Did
it's
I
just,
misunderstand that?
so it's a much more efficient building design to have them stacked. And also, this is a quote unquote comprehensive high school, according to the Department of Education. The difference between a comprehensive high school and a traditional high school is funding. When you have CTE and science labs dispersed throughout the building so that they're not all in one place, you can get additional funding from the Rhode Island Department of Education. So the reason for that being is that they don't want, especially when they look at CTE spaces, they don't want to see CTE as pushed out to another side of the building, and that CTE kids are somehow less than kids that are in traditional academic programming. So the idea of interspersing the spaces across floors is what's called comprehensive high school design. Now, in terms of reality of building, it is much easier and cheaper for me to build symmetrically across 3 floors because when my steel lines up, all my mechanical, my electrical, and my plumbing all line up in the same way. Whereas if I was to build them all on one floor, that floor plan of that building, the steel structure, the light gauge metal framing, the mechanical, the electrical, and the plumbing would be different than the other 2 floors at an added expense. So we're looking at it as we can give you the science labs more technology, more space, if we were to separate them as if we were to have them all on one floor. That doesn't mean that it can't be changed as part of the design. As of right now, it seems to us most efficient to build them that way. But again, this is another place where we can have feedback. We're certainly not cutting cost. It's about making the buildings as efficient as possible, because the more efficient I can make these buildings, the more spaces we can add to them. If we're doing an inefficient building, then we have to take away scope because the building is much more inefficient as you move through the building. Can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. I'm going to continue saying it, but I think we've heard loud and clear that science all wants to be co-located. We'll take it under advisement and see if that's something we can incorporate into the next iteration of the design, depending on where our costs come in.
Just going back to the floor plan, entering the theater, how would so 200 spots are back there. So that's where a majority of the people are going to park. How would I get to the theater where the box office is? How do I get there? Because if we're cording off where the offices are and the classrooms are, that's why we have the doors there, like, right? So that way you don't enter that. How would I get to that theater without walking all the way around the building? So you would go through that main section. So you wouldn't cordon. So you basically have to go through, you would open up that cafeteria would be open, almost like Cole is. When you walk into Cole Middle School, you go into that grand entryway.
Colon EG, yeah, a similar
Exactly.
concept. So, but this door would be closed off, so you can't get into the academic tower. You close off the access to the administration, and you would close off additional spaces so that the wayfinding is.
So your main entrance though there is through the cafeteria. Is that correct? Because you're kind of just saying, I know that's the blue area is your main entrance, that's a grand, but where is the actual door, that vestibule in the white to the left?
So this is the main entrance for day-to-day.
No, not the main, let's focus on the auditorium, right?
Okay.
Where would I enter if I'm parking into, right there? Okay, just clarifying, yeah, okay.
Just to clarify, there is a entrance on the School Street side for the theater where we'd shown in the they showed in the rendering where it said theater above it. So if you were parking at Hazard, which would be over here, or parking on the spots on the front, or parking on the spots on the side of the CTE wing, you could go through this entrance. You wouldn't have to walk all the way around the building. Again, if there was a pre-function, you would want to do that and go to that area, but you would still be able to access it if you came to the front and went to that pre-function area. If there was food sales or a fundraising event there before the show or something like that, like Phil had mentioned, that could be in this main cafeteria area.
I do want to say these questions are enlightening. And when you're looking at something day in and day out, you're not looking at it from your perspective. So I hear the questions, and I think it's something that we need to take note of, which I know you all are, and keep that in mind. And maybe it is a tweak to the design, or maybe it's not, but it's a way that we come up with, okay, this is our flow, and we just make sure it's highlighted in some way, shape, or form. But I appreciate the questions because like I said, if you're looking at something day to day to day to day, you kind of take it for granted. So these questions from an external perspective are helpful.
You were talking about the stairwell and you called it something fancy. What did you say?
Territorium,
Steratorium?
territorium, yep.
What does that mean?
So, it's you might have seen them actually before. They're built into new schools. Barrington Middle School has one. Pretty much all of the new schools that are being designed and built in Rhode Island have some function of one. Think about an amphitheater. It's a lot like an amphitheater on the inside of a building with very large steps and also just regular sized tread steps, so that it could be a place of congregation. It can be used for academic programming. It can be used for kids to hang out and chill and eat their lunches. It is a multifunctional space so instead of just having a stairwell, now you've got this very large, very dynamic space that lends itself to people gathering at it.
Bleachers.
A lot cooler than bleachers, yeah.
Oh.
It's really cool, I promise. I think sometimes they're called communicating stairs as well. But it's a feature. It's certainly a feature.
And it's not just for socializing, classes can congregate
Yeah.
there and do group project type educating. And again, it's something that our educational leaders have discussed intently with our educators, as to, is it a valuable addition to, is it helpful or harmful? And seems to be helpful.
It's an example of these types of flexible spaces that someone asked about earlier. You can do all sorts of things with that space.
And I had a part B. You're going to have lots of open spaces. So security and young people who kind of lose their way. How are you going to have security for, not to bring a bad vibe on it, but all these open spaces, and if someone goes on? You know what I'm saying?
So are you talking about like from a second floor, someone hucking somebody?
No, Chris, she's talking about school safety.
And also,
We have a lot of open spaces, a lot of glass. There's a lot valid concerns, and it is about intruders coming in or kids inside, causing harm.
Correct.
Here, yep.
and throwing someone.
No,
over
because
the
that
balcony.
exact question was asked of me previously. I'm not trying to be pedantic at all. That literally was a concern about some of these open spaces that I was addressing about a month ago. So the buildings are designed in order to maximize safety. It's, as Kate said, it's priority number one throughout the project. But in terms of, I don't know if Slam, you want to weigh in on.
I see you all smiling. Was that a stupid question? Although there's no such
No,
thing.
Stupid question at all.
It's not
I
a
was
stupid
just,
question. No, it's
No.
actually, it's a hard question for us, right? Because we don't
Yep.
want to build buildings that feel like prisons, but we have to build buildings that are super safe. If something unfortunate starts happening in a building, we want people to be able to go flee into safe spaces, lock their doors, be able to close blinds on every window there is inside and outside of the building so they can shelter in place. Have doors between classrooms, so if you have to flee, you could at least get to the next classroom and get to a safer space. Sometimes we have multiple doors so that you could travel even farther in a safe, secure, sort of hidden way within buildings. It's not something that we enjoy having to think about, but we have to. I mean, we all hear about the things that go on, and we try and, as much as we can, game plan what happens, what if, what would you do in this situation, so that we've been proactive about it. So when I was smiling, it was not to make light of it at all. It's unfortunately something that I work out of a Connecticut office from time to time. Sandy Hook happened there. It's ingrained in our DNA to have these horrible things that we have to plan for and be very conscious of. So thank you for bringing it up.
And this is also, as we were seeing earlier, this is also something that we discuss intently with the chief of police, the Rhode Island State Police, with our town manager, within the district, we have a safety task force. It is absolutely top of the priority list.
And just to give one example, that kind of, without going into too many details about the privacy of the security features, but with our current door access systems and then the new door access systems we'll be putting in here, there's alarm systems. So if someone had bad intentions and they wanted to prop a door open to let somebody in, or even if they didn't have bad intentions, a high school student wants to let their friends in and they prop a door open, the technology will actually send texts, emails, phone calls, however you set it up, to the administrators in that building saying, door C3 is open right now, and it'll send an alarm message to that administrator. So Dr. McGarr would get an alarm on his phone saying, door is propped open, so they can immediately react. If someone was, say, an exterior door on the theater side of the building, again, we'll go very innocently that a student's letting another student in, there will be notification systems as a safety feature to let the building administrators know from a safety perspective. Again, so intruders wouldn't be able to get in that way.
Metal detectors.
We haven't had that discussion.
But also, it's about creating conditions that don't want people to prop open doors. Having proper heating and cooling inside of a building, proper operable windows, less of an opportunity for people to get too hot, too stuffy, and want to open their classroom door to the elements outside and let air in, students to potentially do that as well. So it's a multifaceted approach. It's not just the security conditions that we're talking about. It's like thermal comfort, it's door hold opens, it's all those sorts of things that we get into.
So if I must, I think when I heard you asking your question, I heard you asking about the outside areas, right? Of the open space, the security within the open space on the outside. Correct. So inside, not outside. Okay, because I was gonna say that's true. And most of our open space inside the school currently right now is enclosed by the rest of the building. So I believe when we have this open space in this new design, the new school will probably be set up the same way. The only open space we have that is accessible to anybody outside of security within inside of our school is the greenhouse that's on the side.
And just to speak to that point also, everything will have lockable doors, similar to how the high school is set up now. It won't be wide open. The gym won't be left wide open during the day, so kids can go hide behind the bleachers or anything like that. I know on the drawings, it looks like open space, but when those parts of the building are supposed to be shut down, they'll have proper locks and. Oh, no, it's a great question. No, we honestly, on our Monday meeting, we meet every Monday, we meet other days of the week, and these are the kind of conversations we have behind the scenes, so of planning for everything that we can think of now and for the future.
And one of the other things that may not jump out is supervision. So instead of staff all being located, in one specific space, you have supervision throughout the building, which gives a lot more eyes on what's going on. Even little things such as instead of having large group bathrooms, in the current design, we have single stall bathrooms so that there's not an opportunity for bullying when you have a large amount of kids inside one bathroom as well. So it's about thinking about those types of things that we try to be very thoughtful about it. It's certainly the most important part of school design right now, unfortunately.
Chris, we want to move on to some of the high performance features. Oh, I'm sorry.
Just a comment in my role as a school committee member. And Chris mentioned this early in the presentation. We do not make public our security plans. And when our team meets and updates our security plans, they don't leave central office. We as school committee members can go in and review it and bring any questions we have to an executive session, which is not public. And earlier when Chris mentioned this, he said that, you know, the floor plans would not be made public. And that's to prevent people who may not have good thoughts in their head, let's just leave it that way, from getting access and knowing, well, this is how the lock systems work and this is the floor plan. So if I go in this door, I can go, that does not become public.
Yeah, you're 100% right, because as an example, what Brian talked about with these door hold opens, Brian was being kind of innocent about it. I won't be. So Uvalde happened because a door was left open, and that's how that person got into the building. So if we have a system that tells us if a door is open and we can immediately address it, we can mitigate those types of situations.
Okay. I'd like to touch on some of our high performance building goals that may be of interest to you. So currently, we are pursuing a geothermal heating and cooling system. We're looking for full electrification of the building, making it photovoltaic ready. That's solar panels on the roof. We are going to have a very robust technology infrastructure, right? With the emergence of AI and the demand for bandwidth, we want to make sure that that technology infrastructure is as robust as possible on day one. Kathy and Jeff are working towards a very high efficiency building envelope, right? That makes sure that we have super insulated walls, thermal window systems, high insulation on the roof, etc. That's the goal, is to make essentially like a Yeti cooler, basically, that we want to heat and cool as efficiently as possible and recognize as much operational savings on energy. Yes. We do have a generator in the project right now for life safety systems, technology, and food service. But we are not, and likely will not be, planning a generator for the entire building. That the building will be fully electric, yes. All right. Throughout the process that we have to go through publicly, through DEM, et cetera, both at Curtis Corner and here, we're going to be improving the stormwater management systems. All right. There may be current issues that will be resolved through our new planning process. Whatever we can impact on our site, we will do so. So we will make that system as good as possible. We will certainly do no harm to any existing conditions. In fact, they will all be improved to some point. And then in accordance with Northeast CHIPS, we'll have all of the requisite native plantings, recycled content for building materials, low VOCs in the paints and adhesives that we'll be using, as well as another host of acoustic performance and requirements through Northeast CHIPS that we will be going through. So these are the goals we're pursuing right now. All right, next slide. Chris, you want to take it?
So schedule and next steps. So documentation, which is the design process that we're part of, will continue until June of 2025. In the spring of 2025 is when we're going to start to see our procurements happening. So As everybody is aware, sometimes it takes a lot longer to get products now than it did prior to COVID-19. So what our team does, especially with the help of Gilbane, is we identify what we call long lead items, and we bid those out much earlier. The idea is that those items are waiting for us. We are not waiting for them on site. We also will bid out specific packages of work if possible, such as site work, steel erection, foundations, because those are the most front-loaded part of the work. And we can actually get to work on those parts of the building while we are finalizing other smaller details about the buildings inside. You're looking at site mobilization in the spring of 2025. That's when we'll start putting up our safety and our secure fencing. We'll make sure that Terry knows when his student athletes cannot use the fields outside, things like that. Site-specific safety plans, all of that will be public knowledge. Then we'll have another meeting like this prior to construction where we'll say, these are where we expect, where parents can drop off their students during construction, where car traffic, where our staff is going to be parking during construction. All of those sorts of things will be developed in the coming months and will be shared in a public meeting as well. Construction start June, July, August of 2025, and then complete in the summer of 27. We're trying to get this complete as early in that summer as possible to give the teachers plenty of time to move all of their belongings into the new building, so we're not rushing at the back end of the project. Also looking at completing punch lists. Those are small items like touching up paint, dinged walls and things like that. So, and then once construction is complete on this building, we'll move over and we'll start demolishing the other building and doing all of the other site work that we can't do until that building is demolished. Next slide, please.
The other topics of interest were topics that you may have, that's all. So feel free to ask anything.
On the timeline, it says spring 2025. What would make this March or May? Do you understand my question? The 4 months in spring?
Yeah, I guess I understand your question. I'd probably, and Chris, you correct me if I'm wrong, but at this point, I would probably just say spring. There's a reason why I put spring, because we're too early in the process to know exactly when. Chris?
Yeah, I agree. It also depends on the amount of feedback that we get and how often we have to pivot during the design process. And of course, all of these authorities having jurisdiction, Department of Environmental Management, the Rhode Island Department of Education, the State Fire Board. There's a lot of other people that have their hands stirring this pot. If everybody can get on board at the same time, then earlier in the spring. If we have to drag some people along, later in the spring.
Also add to it. I think there were, I know there's one town council member here, but there were a couple. At the end of the day, some of the decisions fall at the council table. For example, when we do price out, and Mr. Beasley, cover your ears, please don't yell at me. When we do go through the geothermal piece and we get a cost for that, that will come to the council to make a decision as to whether or not we go forward with that or not. Our goal would be to design to move forward with that. Okay, our goal is to move forward with that. However, if cost confines us and town council says no, then that's what we have to do. So there are different extenuating circumstances that we do have to take into account that the school building committee does not have control over, but we're doing our best with the help of our owner's project manager and with our partners and our construction managers and our architects and engineers and designers to make sure that we get it as soon as possible in that 4-month period.
Thanks for entertaining my question about your timeline.
There's in the private sector, you see buildings go up in a year. They don't have as many stakeholders at the table as we do.
Would you please define geothermal?
Sure. Yeah, I'll start in, Phil, if you want to touch base, but there was there's a presentation on the website on specifically what geothermal is. I know I keep saying that, but I really encourage people to visit the website. There's a ton of great information on there. So geothermal is a system of where you pump water through deep underground wells, 200, 300, 400, 500 feet deep. Depending on the season, the temperature of the earth will either heat that water or cool that water. It is then brought back into the building and then is circulated throughout the building to heat and cool the building. The idea is you're not using fossil fuels or energy to heat or cool water as part of, so your energy usage is far decreased through a geothermal well system. Geothermal wells are pretty expansive. They're very large well fields. They're very deep wells. There is a cost associated to them. They are, however, considered the gold standard in sustainable heating and cooling systems. There is architects and engineers at this table, though. Have I misstated anything, Phil?
No. I'm happy to explain it in further detail if you'd like, or, okay.
Process. And if it doesn't work, what are your options?
Sure. So, let me oversimplify the systems. Regardless of whatever type of system, you have air that is moving throughout the building, and that air is either warm or cold, depending upon the season. What you need is either a piece of mechanical equipment to make the heating or the cooling, or you use the earth, as Chris mentioned, for geothermal instead of a piece of equipment. So there are options that are very efficient, but the geothermal is the most sustainable and does have significant operational cost savings because you're using the earth as opposed to a piece of equipment to make the heating and cooling.
The feasibility study that we're currently doing will.
So the question is how many wells?
Yeah, so, sorry, the feasibility study that we're currently doing will tell us A, if it's feasible, and then B, if it is feasible, how many wells and how deep those wells need to be. There are some projects that have 200 wells. There are some projects that have 50 wells. Just really depends on the conditions here in South Kingstown.
Could,
I mean, there are very small systems that are just a couple wells. You actually have one here. It's at Verizon. Yeah, there's a geothermal well that is in the Verizon.
The Verizon building off of Main Street, that they have a geothermal well or system. I don't know how many wells they have, but they have a system.
I was just going to ask that question to give us some examples. I know that it's been used around the state. Has it been used in other schools?
So in Rhode Island, public schools, no, this would actually, so we've been, there are a lot of supportive people at the state level for South Kingstown to be the first geothermal public school project in Rhode Island. It would be a substantial achievement. Again, it's dependent on funding, and the school building committee does not set funding for the project. That would be through the town council. So we have requirements in terms of our educational scope that we have to deliver, that our reimbursement is based on. We cannot sacrifice educational scope for geothermal. And just, I'm going to repeat what Kate said. Basis of design right now, what we're currently estimating is geothermal. That is our basis of design.
Okay, so I'm assuming you mentioned that we have a test well out here, right?
Mhm.
All right, so that test well is 800 feet deep. So when they were drilling it at around the 600-foot level, up to about 600 feet, the drilling was very smooth. At that point, talking to the gentleman from Gilbane, he said he got slower. It took it about another day to go the additional 200 feet. Now, there's a high school that's been designed, it's under construction in Massachusetts, Watertown, Massachusetts. A very compact site. It's a 200,000 square foot high school. This building will be 150 or so. So that 200,000 square foot high school in Massachusetts, they dug 10,000 foot wells. So 100,000 feet of depth, 10 1,000 foot wells provides a geothermal energy for that building. So I don't think we're going to need anything anywhere near 50 wells. I'm thinking we're going to need more like 15.
So Doral, just Leftfield is the OPM of that project in Watertown. We are doing another project in Massachusetts that's smaller, that has 70 wells. So it all depends on what the feasibility study had. Yeah.
I was just wondering, do we have an EUI target set for the building?
We will have one when we submit to RIDE in December. So we're working on the energy model now.
Okay,
Oh, sure. So, the EUI is the energy use index. So there is a benchmark for sustainable buildings, their EUI. I do not know what that benchmark number is, so I don't want to say it. But we will be challenged by RIDE to have the lowest EUI possible. That's our goal.
Okay, thank you. I'll check back in December.
We have 1 minute left.
I was just gonna say, and saying it in a different way, to be respectful of everyone's time. First, I do want to thank every person in here who has given 2 hours of their life to sit and listen to us and ask very important and prudent questions. If to kind of bounce off of what Chris has been saying all night, if you have further questions or if you did not feel comfortable saying your question out loud, please email us at
skschoolproject@gmail.com.
So SK School Project, those are singular words. They're not plural. SK School Project at gmail.com or visit our website at skschoolproject.com. We will be having another community forum. I'm not sure of the exact date, but it will be in the next couple months, and we will continue to have these forums. We continue to have our school building committee business meetings. Our next one will be next Thursday in Town Hall Chambers at 6 o'clock. So that is November 21st, 6 o'clock, Town Hall Chambers. Public is welcome. You can email us questions ahead of time. You can show up to the meetings, listen. We have public comment. Come join us, ask questions. We're trying our very best to be as transparent as possible and get our information out there. And sometimes we miss the mark. So if you have questions, bring them to us and we'll make sure we get the information out to you as soon as possible. But again, thank you all for coming here. And if you have any last moment questions for our team, feel free to either raise your hand, we'll try to get to them now, or come see us before you leave if you don't want to speak into the microphone. Thank you.
And just to speak to our meetings, our school building committee, anything that the public does send us, we have a public correspondence on each one of our meetings. So we do bring that up as a topic, answer any questions and kind of highlight anything. So again, if anybody has anything they'd like to bring up, please reach out to school building committee and check out our website.